Craig, welcome to the 6-5.
Hey, Pat, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So it's been a huge year for Intel Foundry. I mean, you had your first customer event in February. You broke ground in Columbus. Can you talk about just any noticeable big milestones that you can share with the crowd just to get them up to speed?
Yeah, sure. Yes, this year, like you said, we've had a lot going on. I think my wife is wondering why I'm never home. But that's partly because of all the stuff we're doing. And so we've had a lot of support. The thing that strikes me the most, at least, is we've had a lot of support from the customers, from our ecosystem partners, and from the government. We've had a lot of actual, really tangible results along each of those dimensions so far. So we have customer wins across all of our technology platforms. We have especially the 6 wins on 18A, and we're all on our way to becoming the #2 foundry in the world. We had announced at Direct Connect all of our technological progress and our future roadmap. So of the big 5 nodes in 4 years plan that Pat announced a couple of years ago, we have 3 of those done, and we're on track to deliver the last 2, 20A and 18A. So we get back to process leadership here in 2025. Then with the ecosystem, we announced partnerships with Cadence, Synopsys, ARM, and we actually had all of their leaders at our Direct Connect event, which, you know, if you followed Intel for a long time, you'd be really quite shocked that Rene Haas was standing on stage with Steve.
Greg, I have been following Intel for 35 years.
Did you ever think you'd see that, right?
Actually, no. So, but it's great to see.
Yeah, and we had, a great list of, industry speakers. We had Sam Altman, we had Satya Nadella making a virtual appearance, Gina Raimondo, Secretary Raimondo, and then a bunch of customers as well. And then I think the final thing is on the government side, we announced the CHIPS Act funding, which was all very exciting. It's a total of $44 billion, right? 8.5 direct, and then 11 in loans, and a 25% tax credit on the $100 billion investment. So we're getting a lot done here in a very short time.
Yeah, I have to tell you, when your CEO, Pat Gelsinger, rolled out 5 nodes in 4 years in the context of your IDM 2.0 strategy, I was like, that seems aggressive, right? Let's see where this goes. And to your credit, right, you've been able to hit, you're over halfway there. What I'd love to do is dive into your approach and your strategy. It's a system foundry approach, which I think you had mentioned was really good for this AI area. Can you drill down on this system foundry approach?
One of the things that became pretty obvious from talking with our customers and from observing the trends in the industry is that the way that things have been set up until now has worked very well until now, right? But with AI coming online, we need a whole entirely different approach. It's still very early in the AI kind of era, if you will, but already it's getting pretty clear that the way things are done today in the industry, the path we're currently on, it's not going to be sustainable from either a power perspective or from a sustainability and reliability perspective. So if you look at what you have to do to actually get to these leaps and bounds that are required to make AI commercialized successfully, it actually takes optimizing everything from the factory all the way up through the software. The foundry model today is, you make something really, really well for chips and maybe a little bit of packaging in there. And that has worked great. But if you want to get to the point where you're keeping up with the scaling of AI, we have to do something dramatically different. And that's why the system foundry pyramid that we use to express this starts with, doing everything well that a foundry is supposed to do, because you can't be a systems foundry unless you're first a foundry.
Right.
And then we layer onto that the advantages that are needed to bring AI everywhere sustainably and scalably. And so the next level on top of that is actually a resilient and sustainable and secure supply chain. And then above that, we differentiate by bringing the systems of chips capabilities that Intel has developed over its 50-year history to bear. And so the combination of those 3 things really helps you optimize everything from the factory all the way through the software. That's going to be critical if you want to keep up with the scaling that's demanded of us by AI.
That's great. And by the way, stuff like the compute, networking, and cooling, right? Totally self-explanatory. Get that. What kind of software are you talking about here?
So this can be multiple things, right? So there's the the one API software that everyone talks about, this abstraction layer to help things plug in easily, especially on the enterprise customers. But there's even things that are, if you dig a little deeper, that are more differentiated. You know, we have something called the AI NIC that Sachin announced in the Vision event. So what that is an open alternative to that is basically twice as power efficient at the same speed. But if you want to take that and use that, if let's say you're a hyperscaler, you need to be able to go and say, okay, how is that going to perform in my system? How is it going to be integrated to my software stack? And we can help with both of those. We have software that'll help the customers simulate it in their own environment, what performance benefits they'll get. We have also the capability to help the customers write code and put that code into their software stack. So that's one example, but there's other things too, like, you know, emulation software to look at how do you accelerate being able to write your code before your chip comes out, and a whole bunch of other things that we'll be announcing probably next year at Direct Connect.
Yeah. Are you sure you just don't want to spill it here?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're not a breaking news show here. It's more about thought leadership and strategy here at the summit. But it is cool. And by the way, I also appreciate, and you know, it used to be, you know, the wafer and the silicon was front and center, and the packaging was kind of an afterthought. Now it's like you can't do any of this AI goodness without having great wafer fab capabilities and also the packaging of all this goodness. So literally, packaging is now like a first order citizen, and you know, things like EMIB and Foveros, and you know, the ability to package memory and multiple chiplets. I know you call them the tiles, but it's definitely, the industry is changing, huh?
Yeah, we think that, you know, by the 2028-ish timeframe, probably 60 or 70% of the advanced node chips, like less than 5 nanometer that ship, will actually go into packages that are either 2.5D or 3D or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
So it's going to be pretty much everything at some point. And Intel, a lot of people don't really realize this, right? But Intel has a lot of capability to do this. You know, we have 3 to 4x the capacity of TSMC in advanced packaging. And then we do so many different varieties and configurations of these chips and are vertically integrated. So we can influence everything from the substrate all the way up through the cooling, like we talked about. And so we're able to, and we even actually have specialized equipment and so forth for assembling. So we're able to put these really complicated chips together with really good performance, power, area, and especially really high yield.
Yes. Yeah, it's just fun. I mean, it's not just AI. It's just, you know, chiplet revolution, different types of developers adding different types of IP. It's fascinating here. So I'm going to dial out a little bit on this and ask you kind of a 50,000 foot question. How does Intel Foundry look at the potential of AI? I mean, sure, it's going to be big. It's going to be bigger than anybody even thought it could be. But how do you look at it through your lens?
Yeah, so I think in terms of a market size perspective, you know, when we look at the data for, let's say, the most advanced node at any given time, by the 2028 timeframe, we see probably about 80% of all wafers shipped will have a significant component of that related to AI, and probably about 30% or 40% of those wafers will be exclusively dedicated to AI. So from a market perspective, it's going to be very large. But the challenge that we see is, you know, it's very early in the game. We haven't even gone through the hockey stick for AI yet.
Exactly.
But already we're seeing the amount of computations you have to do to train a model double like every 10 months, right? The amount of power used for these things, like next year alone, will be greater than 60% of countries. And so if you put all those systems, that's just for the chip itself, right?
Right.
For the server chip. But if you put those into a system, it ends up being like 3 times the power consumed by the entire United Kingdom. So it's just a staggering amount. And so if we want to be able to go to that rate where we're improving this and keeping up with the amount of flops that are needed every year and the amount of memory bandwidth that's needed every year, it can't happen just by Moore's Law. It has to happen. You can't, you know, Moore's Law it's great. It's going to continue to fuel us, but it's not going to get us 100 or 1,000x improvements over the next 5 years. So we have to, that's why we're doing this whole systems approach, because if you optimize all of those things together, you can get there.
I'm really glad you brought up power. I mean, the more that I dig into this, you know, there's literally Weston, Virginia is the home of many hyperscalers, data centers, and they literally don't have any more power on the grid to do anything more. Okay, that literally says we put even, big EV stations there or more housing. If we don't do something different, we will not have enough power. And it takes about 10 years to get, say 5 years to get a new power source online. And that was part of the best and freshest example of this power. And, it's wild to think the impact that you at Intel Foundry can have on this overall power equation when you look at how many chips that you bring out and the sophistication with leading nodes and your ability to optimize that. You have the ability to have a huge impact on that power draw holistically.
Yeah, definitely. And more, the power is 100% true, right? But I think it's even bigger than that too, in the sense that we also have to not just address the power that comes from running the chips, but the power that's used to create the chips. So if you look at where they're all created today, they're all created in countries that not only is it dangerously centralized or in terms of supply chain, but the countries where they're made, they don't have access to renewable electricity. And so as a planet, for our countries, for our economies, for our companies, for the planet, we have to get much better at doing this.
But I'd love to talk about differentiation. Where are your points of differentiation with your competitors? And, I would say on leading edge, right, you've got two competitors, and then on kind of the middle of the stack that you'll be addressing yourself over time or through partners, there's a lot more competitors in there. So give me the elevator pitch here.
Sure, yeah. So I think there's two ways that I look at it, at least. One is in terms of how differentiated is each aspect of the traditional Foundry offering, and then how is it put together in a way that makes it more differentiated. And so if we start with that system Foundry triangle concept, pyramid concept that we have, the bottom of it is that world-class Foundry offering, right? And so you look at the process technologies. I think we showed in our investor day, Intel 3 is kind of coming up to be competitive. 18A, we get back to leadership. 14A, we think we're in leadership position. That's where we introduce high NA. 18A is where we introduced with the industry first backside power and gate all around together. So I think on the technology front, we're getting back to process leadership. On packaging, we talked about how much more capacity, the 3 to 4x capacity we have. We also do so many more different configurations of packaging and are able to do so at the really high yields with really large sizes and really good cost. So I think at that level we're differentiated, but where I think things really start to shine is when you move up to the next levels of the triangle, right? If you look at a resilient and sustainable supply chain, who has that? No one. And so we're going to be doubling the amount of capacity that's available in the world outside particular regions. And then we're also doing that very sustainably, right? We have 99% of the power we used last year was from renewable sources already. So that's a differentiator. And then once you go up even further to actually thinking about the systems of chips capabilities, like being able to know how to design something, how to help our customers architect something, how does the compute and the memory and the network need to be in balance and mapped well to the software? Who else can help you do that? Other companies, the model is more like, okay, here's your PDK. If you follow the rules I put in here, it'll yield. So I think that's where the differentiation comes in. Sure, we have the differentiation at the process level, at the packaging level. Right. When we start to put everything in together from the factory network up through the systems of chips capabilities, that's where it gets really special.
No, I appreciate you pointing that out. And because it's somewhat of a newer concept, it's important to be talking about that over and over and over, kind of like we are on this video right now. So that's the good part about it is, I have always thought that balancing the supply chain was critical. In fact, I may or may not have been an advisor to the previous administration on what became the CHIPS Act, not violating any NDAs, DOD, but I was involved in that, and I saw it was crystal clear for me too. And plus, I mean, I spent a lot of time traipsing around China and Taiwan and Asia, so I'm very, very familiar with the region and kind of the pluses and the minuses here. We, by the way, certainly a lot of those geopolitical elements. We saw the U.S. government gets serious about it with the CHIPS Act. But I want to ask you about the future here. What does the future look like? How do you define success, and how should we measure your degree of success over the upcoming years?
So I think for us, ultimately, the future will be judged by our execution, right? So did we deliver on the technology milestones that we set out? Did we deliver on the performance, the power, and area that we promised our customers we would deliver? And then as a result of that, we're going to see customers more and more coming on board. Foundry is one of those things where essentially, as you know, you're going to a customer and say, hey, bet your company on us. If we are not in this together, and if you can't trust us, then essentially their business will fail. And so we have to continue to earn that trust over time by saying what we're going to do and then actually doing it. And so we're really focused on that. And so far, we think it's going well. We have a pipeline of business awards that are about $15 billion. And we believe we have a path, solid, credible path to get to about $15 billion of annual run rate by 2030, which that's from external customers alone. And you combine that with the internal, and I think that we'll be squarely in the number 2 foundry spot that we set out to be.
That is so audacious, Craig, and so exciting. It's funny. It's easy for me being on the pundit side to kind of watch what was going on. But if you've read anything that I've talked about related to Intel, I saw the opportunity there. It was crystal clear. And I think I was in the industry for over 20 years. And it was funny, I was actually Intel's biggest customer once. And okay, I was one of your biggest competitors too. But I got to know, you get to know the industry, and you see the signs. And what I'm seeing is very positive. The thought that 18A could be not only the most cost competitive, but feature and performance competitive. I saw that on your last Direct Connect slide is huge. And then moving into 14A. Is pretty wild and not that far off, right? Some people think, you can crank out a new bank of software in like a month, but to build a foundry, get process, it takes like 4 to 5 years of planning to get something like that going. So literally the decisions that you all made years ago are just coming into fruition now. And the signs of success that I'm seeing, obviously everybody wants to see more. They want to know who it is, right? Like, which customer, how much. By the way, ironically, your competitors don't have to share any of that, but they want that from you. But I see the signs on the wall. It was funny, 10 years ago, people were telling me, semiconductors, they're a commodity, right? And, anybody can make them and anybody can do this. And then the pandemic hit and we're like, oh, wow. Diversified supply chain is super important. And it wasn't just the bleeding edge tech that mattered. It was always kind of the specialty and the lagging edge. And then generative AI hits and it's like, it just amplifies this, and is the semiconductors are the currency of building out AI and all of this stuff that software runs on. So I'm super excited, Craig. You seem super excited about this, and I look forward to anything, your next divulgement of information. So I will be listening.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it too. And I think, customers are getting excited about it. The ecosystem's getting excited about it, and government's getting excited about it. They're all kind of behind us. But, you mentioned what happened during the pandemic, right? And that was for 30-cent chips, right? Disrupting our whole supply chain. Imagine now that AI is going to be in everything we do. What happens when all those chips who currently come from one vendor and one foundry are not available, right? And so I think people are going to start caring a lot more about this. And Intel, as we demonstrate that we are a real foundry, that we've been executing, the conversations have been shifting from, can you execute, to, okay, how can we do this? Or how's it going to work? And more the logistics of it. So, the progress is there and it's being recognized by the whole ecosystem. So we're really happy to see it.
Yeah, it's been it's fun to watch because it's so big, it's so bold, it's so audacious, and so important, all kind of wrapped up into one. So, Craig, thanks for coming in here and speaking at the 6.5 Summit 2024.
Hey, Pat, thank you for having us. We're super excited.